Everybody in San Diego and Southern California, and I think around the world, one way or another, at least in business, knows the name Papa Doug Manchester. Here's the man himself. He has written a special book here recently it's basically for the record for family and close friends, and I'm proud to have one of these because we've kind of lived a lot of these years together in the 46 years I've been here in San Diego. Thanks for joining us here on the video podcast. Good to have you.
It's always great to be with you, Mark.
So I got to ask you, this comes up all the time. People say, the Papa Doug thing. I remember growing up in Illinois, Papa George Hallis with the Bears. And what was the origin when you said, no, I want to be Papa Doug?
Well, it actually came about as the fact that Betsy and I wanted to have 4 children. And we had 3 children right away. And then she had a miscarriage, several miscarriages over the next 10 years. And then we were blessed with our 4th daughter, which was our gift from God after all these miscarriages. And then, of course, the 4 daughters. And then, we obviously wanted to have a son if possible. And so when we were blessed with Douglas coming into our lives in 1983, the fact is that my father had been a junior and he could never measure up to his younger brother, who was an any-day wonder and this and that. And so I didn't want Douglas to be junior to anybody. And so when we were coaching Little League or whatever it is, and a good friend of mine, Scott Rogers, coined the name because they would say, hey, junior, go do this. He's not a junior. And so then Scotty Rogers, who's a dear friend, said, just call him Papa Doug. And that was, 40 years ago or whatever it is. So anyway, I enjoy being called Papa Doug because I'm the only Papa Doug and he's the only Douglas.
You didn't change that on your legal papers on the driver's license?
No, I haven't done that. I probably should because
you could,
some of all my checks and credit cards and all the other stuff. So.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm looking through some of the greatest hits, the Papa Dougisms here in the book. And these are things I've heard you say. These are great, encouraging things, and sometimes, really deep thoughts for life. And I know that that's what guides you through what has been a continuing amazing career. And that's not like it's all perfect. I want to talk about some of the things maybe aren't as perfect. And you're still going strong at age. Can we reveal your age?
80.
Yes, I recall the party you had, and it was it was something. But here's some of the Papa Dougisms. Live life like it's the Super Bowl every day. A 60-minute game, only with 0 timeouts, and no instant replays. If you hit rock bottom, use it as a new foundation. Avoid bad decisions by measuring risk and never bet the farm. Play what if instead of sitting back and waiting for problems to find you. Always have an exit alley in case you hit a dead end. These are great. Never get organized by a trade union. The result will always be chaos and outrageous expenses. I'm sure the union boss is watching like that. Yeah. Never trust a bank. What else? You never hesitate to praise someone doing something right. That's for sure. God is in everyone and everything, so seek him out and keep him near you. Always have the man in the glass as your best friend. Who's the man in the glass? Talk about that.
Well, the fact is that you could go through your whole life and kid yourself, but the man in the glass, person looking back at you, is the one you have to please, never mind all the rest, because he's the one with you from the beginning into the end. Yeah. And it's not your husband or wife or your mother or father whom you need to please. You need to please the person looking back at from the glass.
So it's like a mirror kind of thing.
And if you don't, your whole life will end up with heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass.
Well, it's amazing to me, having known you all these years, and I've seen the big things. I've also been with you as a friend over the years through some low points, as we all have. That's life. Yours just tend to be sometimes more public because you're such a public figure. When you build big things, there's always someone. I think there's a line somewhere. I don't know if it was yours, but if you're not getting opposition, you're probably not doing it right, because doing big things will always get you blowback. There's always someone to say, I can't do it. when you look at that, and anybody looks at your accomplishments, and I think it'd be important here just to say for people watching who maybe haven't done the San Diego experience, you can go on the waterfront and go, built it, did that, sold that, built it, and on and on and on. So some of your greatest hits, when you list them, like big development accomplishments, what's at the top of your list?
Well, the top of my list is a non-development. I was privileged and honored to be on the board of trustees at the University of San Diego. And when I joined the board, it was losing $900,000 a year. It didn't have any endowment, and they wanted to change the architecture to a less, it's a beautiful Spanish Renaissance architecture, and they wanted to grow the enrollment to 10,000. I said, no, let's grow in strength and stature versus size. And we did, and now it's got a great, wonderful student body, and it was voted #1 campus in the United States as far as beauty. So I feel very, 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 very blessed that we were able to hold the line there and create a wonderful university. And so that's, I guess, the waterfront, the Hyatt and the Marriott and the Marina. I'll never forget interviewing a little company up in Bellingham, Washington, that were doing concrete docks, and where you can splice the electrical through the dock and water or whatever it is. And so one of their first projects was the 500 slip marina that I built as part of the Marriott, San Diego Marriott Hotel and Marina. And now, of course, Bellingham. I was just recently in Greece and Athens. Turkey and Greece, and anywhere you go through the West Coast, Martha's Vineyard, Boston, everywhere you go, there's a Bellingham dock. So, which is floating concrete.
Well, just looking at
things like that, give me a lot of joy. Yeah.
And the Grand Del Mar, probably, I think you've said it's your best work yet as far as hotels. You have that beautiful hotel that you and your son work with in Austin, Texas as well, and plans for yet another one downtown San Diego. But you don't build stuff that falls down.
I hope not.
It's enduring.
Liquefaction is a factor here in San Diego. All of the hotels are built on piles. And I was recently in Turkey, in Ephesus, and Ephesus was where John took Mary after the crucifixion, and that's where she died. And there's a house of Mary there. And I went there 30 years ago, and I was always amazed that we went into the Dark Ages, because 2,000 years before Christ, Ephesus fell victim to a volcanic eruption, but it was all just liquefaction, where everything just sank. They've uncovered everything. And back 2,000 years before Christ, you had heated floors, air conditioning, flushing toilets. Now you can go into the Loire Valley, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful valleys in the world, in France. And all of these beautiful castles were built for the kings and queens to go out for weekend retreats and etc. But everything was bedpan. They're, by basically slaves. They didn't have running water. They didn't have flushing toilets. And yet 2,000 years before Christ, we were able to accomplish that. And so I really think he went into the Dark Ages, after, about 1,000 years before Christ. And all the way up to, as an example, the Biltmore Mansion, which is on Cliff Walk in Newport, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. Beautiful mansion, gorgeous, 125,000 square foot home, and a wonderful, wonderful estate that's now, part of the historical register there and all that. But once again, this is 80 or something like that. It didn't have a flushing toilet until, after the turn of the century. So it's pretty amazing what happened during what leadership can do and what leadership can't do. And
Right, when
we obviously
civilization,
had some bad leadership during
yeah,
the
civilizations perish. Absolutely. Papa Doug Manchester, your book that you wrote for family and friends called Always Rise Tall, a memoir of building a legacy and never giving up. I think some people might think that your legacy is all about some edifice somewhere, not Ephesus, but edifice, with the towers, the great buildings. And again, more going on. Most recently, the Navy headquarters down by the Broadway Pier. And you have more plans for a special corner of that. It's big money stuff. And sometimes you run into, well, let's say the COVID crisis or other economic calamity. You talk about a stress level, which, with all the victories and all
I've
the
had a lot of defeats. So
right. And that's what I want to ask you. What I want to ask you, okay, we got into a little bit on this last question, but your best high, what's your biggest victories? I'm going to ask you about your deepest low.
My biggest victory as far as the development, you're saying?
About anything. It could be a life thing, because that's about legacy. So maybe it's an edifice. Maybe.
I mean, it's got to be family. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
so blessed to was married to a beautiful woman for 44 years, and she's still, I consider her my best friend. And we had 5 children and 13 grandchildren. We're expecting a 14th. Douglas and Emily are going to give birth to a son here on October 9th. Anyway, so that's my biggest achievement, if you want to say it, is to have a happy, healthy, and prosperous family that enjoys each other. I actually want to have them have the baby a day early, and I know that Emily would appreciate that, and have it born on October 8th, which is happens to be my daughter Katie's birthday. And Katie is one of the most dynamic party girls in the world, and she enjoys life so much that he would have this young little whippersnapper that's coming out on October 8th or 9th, yeah, would have somebody to share a birthday with for the rest of his life. So anyway, that's family is the greatest achievement.
Yeah. And of course, whether you wanted it to be public or not, along the way, when you and Betsy parted ways and you still stay close, and then you've had other episodes along the way, they tend to make the news because you're Papa Doug Manchester. That happens. I've always been struck by the fact that you really work hard to make sure, however broad the family may be, you step up and you do what needs to be done, even when some of that road is changing. So how do you do that?
With prayer and God's help, and being the luckiest man that can walk this earth. I feel, I get up every day and I do say, Papa Doug, this is the first day of the rest of your life. So you gotta live it like it's a Super Bowl, without any timeouts or any instant replays. Live it to the fullest, and treat everybody the way you like to be treated. Amen.
Good advice to anybody. Now, when you look at the valleys, and you've had a lot of them, and you've had, when I mentioned when COVID hits, you got this big development downtown and financing, you had to get that, all of a sudden the whole world shuts down. Obviously that was one on the business side, but when you look at life's inevitable valleys, yours just seem to be larger and more public because, you're more public. But
well, the biggest valley that we as a family have sustained is that my daughter was killed, essentially killed by a person lacing a pill with fentanyl, and so unfortunately he's in prison now. And
that was 2020, right? That was in the middle of 2020.
Right. He was just sentenced a few weeks ago. It was very emotional for our family.
Yeah.
But bottom line is the fact that she was a beautiful person, and that actually everybody that was around her loved Sally, and so proud that has 3 incredible, wonderful children, grandchildren to me, and they're doing very, very well.
So along the way, the peaks and valleys, and life as it is, and getting back up, dust yourself off, get back in the arena, as the line goes. That's inspirational. It's also essential just to enjoying life. I know when you, I mean, along the way, and one of the things in the book you wrote just for family and friends, where you're talking about some of the blowback you get when you're going to do a big project. There's always somebody who wants to sue, or there's always somebody who's got some not so secret interest and it blows up. And then a lot of times those people go out there and will go after you and give you bad PR. Because let's face it, if I mention your name in town, I'm going to get people who know you and just and appreciate and pay attention to the whole breadth of your experience. And there's some people who go, man, he's a pain in the ass, but those people, I think we have a list of names, but that comes with the territory, doesn't it? I mean, certainly Trump gets
Well,
that.
a good example of that is, I worked very hard along with a great associate of mine, Peter Latrena, who's no longer with us, but's looking down, is that we brought in the aircraft carrier Midway,
Right.
To be a tourist attraction, really, for the Hyatt, and the Coastal Commission fought us tooth and nail because we were going to be shading the fish habitat. I mean, here again, this is ridiculous, but that's what happens when you go up against governmental agencies. So it's, but as you say, it goes with the territory, and hopefully, brighter minds and empathetic minds will prevail.
Does that ever get under your skin? If you're getting super unwarranted criticism, do you just brush it off? Do you go back and go to a primal scream room, or what do you do?
You just have to give thanks to God for the fact that you live in the greatest country in the world, you live in the greatest state in the country, notwithstanding, and you live in the greatest city within the state. And that's how I grew up, and it has changed. Perhaps it's not the greatest state any longer. Still think it's the greatest city, but everything's changing, and it's not, a lot of it's not for the good. But I looked at possibly giving up my citizenship and moving to another country.
Wow.
And I dismissed that because you got to stay here and fight. You got to stay here and fight for what I enjoyed is growing up. I mean, I had the greatest childhood that anybody possibly could ask for. I had loving parents. Once again, the greatest country in the world, the greatest city within the greatest state. I mean, I was really blessed, and all of us here in San Diego and California, we don't appreciate, a lot of the change that's taken place, and the police disorder and the defunding and the this and that.
Yeah.
But we kind of stay here and fight. We got to, in fact, make sure that our children it'll return to what it was, and we just can't give up.
I'm totally with you on that, because again, I've been here 46 years, same kind of thing. It's like there's too many connections here. You just don't want to casually go, I'll move to Florida or Texas. It's tempting at times, but it's definitely not the state to which we moved back in 1976, when the schools were in the top 5, and the political culture. San Diego is more conservative politically. I always wonder about this. If you could go back in time, let's say you're still a go-go kind of a guy, but back, let's say it's 40 years ago, whatever, and you're looking at all these projects that you've built, and other ones that you envision, you still dream of building, and you got many more years left, you'll build some more. Would you do all of that knowing what you now know about where California is right now, for example, politically and with regulations? Or will you say, I've talked to some other mutual friends of ours who have restaurants and things, and they get into these 50-year leases and all that, and I've asked them, would you do it again? They're like, I wouldn't do it right now, not with this bunch.
I'd still do it.
Did you? See, tenacious.
You got to fight the good fight.
Well, even if they and you've been there, done that enough. If you get criticism, maybe that does criticism does that kind of inspire you a little bit? Does it remind you you're on the right track when you get some blowback?
No, nobody likes criticism, and neither do I. So, but it comes with the territory. There's certain people that get jealous of what you're doing. There's certain governmental agencies that don't want it to happen. There's unions that unless you're part of the union, they don't want it to happen. And that's not a good thing, but it happens.
Yeah. Thinking about a lot of the adventures you've had in your life where you just, with everything else going on, I don't know how you do this. Again, I know faith is part of it and family and all the other, but you have a certain drive going back to when you were doing underwriting insurance and going back to all the early days in San Diego and doing whatever jobs necessary. But in the middle of all these big projects, with all that level of stress, sometimes you'll say things like, I think I'm going to learn to fly. I think I'm going to go out and, oh, by the way, I'll just fly around the world. I mean, that whole story, that would take a whole separate couple of podcasts here, but that's something you don't normally do unless you have a lot of time, or going up and, snow skiing, helicopter in someplace. And there sometimes were many disasters along the way, but that's pretty gutsy.
Well, it's just part of the wonderful zest for life, actually. I always wanted to be a marine aviator, and I was prevented from doing so because I had a doctor tell me that maybe I wouldn't live until I was 27 or 28. Wow. And when I was 18 or 19, because I had acute glomerulonephritis of the kidney, and in those days they didn't have dialysis and they didn't have kidney transplant. So, but in any event, my brother flew for the Air Force, and I always wanted to be a pilot, and I started flying early on, and then I got so busy I said I'm going to kill myself, and then I finished the Torrey Pines Business and Research Park and the biotech cluster at Torrey Pines, and made more money than I thought I'd ever. My father and mother ran away to each other when they were 17, and came out and worked in the factories during World War II. So I retired,
And at age what? What age?
I don't know. I think it was, well, it was, I can't remember now, but it
like
was
37 or something like that.
Yeah, 37 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I went to Sun Valley, Idaho, and I flew every day, skied every day, played tennis, the whole 9 yards, and had a great time. And at the end of the 2-year period, when I lived up there, I flew a King Air 200 turboprop, around the world, and had a great time.
Just another thing to do.
Well, it was good. It was good.
So what do you still want to do? I'm not talking about building things, whatever. And maybe it's an adventure thing. 'Cause I know like we all get older, and you had some health challenges. You had some big ones a couple of years ago. I mean, going back to losing your daughter, and that was a very stressful year. And frankly, some of us were just happy to see you made it through. We weren't sure at times because
well, stress will kill you. Stress will kill you, and sadness will kill you. So you got to keep on praying. And
so what's your wild thing you haven't done yet, if there's anything on earth?
Well, I've given it up on it, and I shouldn't have, but I have. I wanted to climb Mount Everest, and I had done a lot of research and Sherpas and all that stuff, but I never did it. My good friend Jim Jameson had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and I was going to do that too. And one thing happened or another. I was sick or injured or whatever. But bottom line is the fact that's what I really wanted to do. I haven't done. I would like to build a 100-story building.
Where would you put that? In San Diego? I'm just seeing if they're paying attention at this point.
No, I can't do it in San Diego because we have a 500-foot height limitation, which I made happen because I had a building down here that I was supposed to be 400 feet, and they knocked me down after I built the infrastructure in the garage and podium. You can't do that because it's on the flight path. And well, I proved them wrong because the flight path.
And which building was that one?
That was the Columbia Center building. It's with a big American flag on it.
Big flag, right.
And so they cut me back 100 feet and allowed me to put a 100-foot flagpole on top. So that really makes a lot of sense. So, but
well, you're no stranger to patriotism. I love your unabashed patriotic attitude, and being a big Trump supporter as you were, and you early on during the primary roped me in. You called, said, I need a favor. I want you to MC this thing that Trump's doing down at the convention center for the veterans. Yeah. That's when it was still primary season, although he looked like the guy. But where the country is now, and just the suppression of speech, that
Horrible.
what's happened, and it seems like many of us get that and see that. I think that transcends left or right or Republican or Democrat. When government can shut you up and keep you from your constitutional rights, that's chilling, isn't it? And I know that motivates you even more.
Yeah, no, this has to change. I mean, it's and obviously, that I'm very conservative and Republican, and I just can't believe what's happened to the Democratic Party, where they wanted to defund the police. I don't understand why we even have a border patrol, because they say that the border is secure. That's such bullshit. I mean, the bottom line is the fact that you just see the thousands of people. I estimate there's 5 million new citizens. I mean, new illegals, and they're trying to make them citizens. So I absolutely just I think from time to time we have to sit back and say, what in the hell is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And police are so important. When I grew up, you did what a policeman told you to do. He was serving his country, his city, his citizenship, protecting us, and all they do is try to defund them, and then when they do their job, then they arrest somebody, and then he's let go the next day without any bail.
Right.
So I
Well,
mean, it's sick, and
Yeah.
and it's really the liberals that are doing this, and then what's really makes me sick is then they in fact then they try to blame it on the Republican Party.
That's right, or the
Well,
left or right.
just, I
So
mean,
that'll be a whole. We're out of time because we're coming up this brick wall where I think we have to put more coins in
Okay,
Zoom,
good.
and it
All
doesn't.
always
So
great to be with you.
we'll follow that up next time, because that's a whole separate story.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you are the most patriotic, liberty-loving American that I know. Your
Well,
support for the military is
and
unmatched.
that goes both ways. Okay, buddy.
And great spending time with you.
Friend, and God bless you. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.